right, so Marshall, why would a loving God send people to hell?
What a big question. Of course, I understand you've had lots of other very impressive people with deep spiritual credentials on, and I know you asked them all nice softball questions.
Well, you're the final one. So you're the we saved the best for last.
I think the place I have to start is I don't know. I don't know that that's the right question. I don't know what the answer is. I feel like I'm not a complete dummy. I've read a bunch on the topic. Again, grew up Baptist, went to a Baptist college. You have to take a couple Bible classes,
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that I've heard. I had someone ask me a similar question. They're like, okay, but what did Jesus really say about it? Because I know lots of people say lots of things, but like they're just like misinterpreting like stuff, right? They're just making up stuff. What did Jesus actually say? And I said, well,
because if you're a
let's
good
look at that.
Christian, if you're a good Christian, you really believe totally in hell, and you kind of like it too. You're kind of excited about it.
Yeah, one of the things I thought was very reassuring was listening to Dr. Tim Mackey of the Bible Project talk about this. He says Jesus has a lot to say about heaven and hell, but he doesn't answer most of the questions that we have. And so the real struggle in understanding what the truth is about hell is to understand what Jesus is trying to tell us and not answer the questions that we first have when we come to it. And I find that's a very useful perspective. It's also very difficult because I also would really like to understand. There seems to be this dichotomy. There seems to be this concept where people will be punished forever.
Yeah.
And yet what we know of God in other places doesn't seem to match up with that, right? That seems to be overkill or just taking something too far. I also think it's interesting that the question leaves out some things, right? There's more to God than love, even though God is love and he's the embodiment of it. So you can't contradict that, but that's also not the only thing. There's also more to our experience than everything gets a happy ending, right? One of the things that I find is really interesting is that there are people who can't understand how God would ever send someone to hell, right? That just seems to be too in conflict with the love. But then again, they come across a news article or something, someone's done something horrible. Maybe they've got trauma in their own life, and there's someone who's done something horrible to hurt them. And are they just going to get away with that is their question. Some people get away with horrific crimes, right?
There seems to be kind of two crossing ideals. One of them is that a loving God would never punish or never separate from anybody. And then the other ideal is that there has to be justice for people who are victimizing others. And so we don't seem to have a conflict in our lives. We want justice, but when we apply it to God, we seem to have a double standard, or think that there shouldn't be that kind of resolution doesn't work. Why don't you take us through some Jesus passages on hell as a starting point?
Well, Jesus talks about heaven and hell in every gospel multiple times. It's something that he says quite a bit about, actually. And so it would be very convenient to say, oh, some other Bible writers kind of added some things here and maybe built something up that was really not meant to be. But Jesus has some very clear, strong things to say that, again, don't answer the questions that I really want to have. And he says things in different ways, and that also kind of is confusing sometimes. But one of the other things that we very easily miss as English readers of the Bible is that Jesus uses a couple of different words for hell. The first is Gehenna, which is a real place.
On earth.
On earth, yes. You can visit there. You can buy a plane ticket. You can jump on the bus, and you can actually go by, and they have a place you can take pictures. I understand that says "Welcome to Hell."
Yeah.
And the word that he uses almost every time when he talks about hell is actually Gehenna. So an example is Matthew 5:21. He says, "You have heard that it was said to an older generation, do not murder, and whoever murders will be subject to judgment. But I say to you that anyone who is angry with a brother will be subject to judgment, and whoever insults a brother will be brought before the council, and whoever says fool will be sent to fiery Gehenna." What an odd thing, right? Because, hey, there's murder's going to be subject to judgment. You don't expect to get away with murder. If you insult someone, they'll bring you up on charges. And if you say fool, you'll go to a fiery Gehenna. Wow.
He seems to want to be shocking them with, like what you said, more of a marginal transgression has the most extreme punishment.
Right, exactly. We don't really think fool is that, really, wow.
There's a lot of worse things to call someone than fool. And some of them start with the letter F too, but you fool, it sounds like, what's the big deal?
And he keeps on going. He says, "You've heard it said, do not commit adultery, but I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to desire her has already committed adultery with her in her heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better to lose one of your members than to have your whole body thrown into Gehenna." So again, he's talking about Gehenna, which is this location that you can take a bus to.